That's a very sensitive microphone, you know? Super sensitive, okay. It needs to be a little farther away like this, okay. Are we on time? Yes, it's exactly 3 o'clock. Thank you all for coming. I have the pleasure to have a talk at the very last session, so last but not least. And I bet you all are very tired, and hey, there's nothing more energizing than a research talk, right? And some data analysis. So I gotta point out that it has been a really long time since I had my last public talk, so I'm a bit rusty, so forgive me for that. But my name is Jakub Ryfa. I represent Fool's Theory at the Game Industry Conference, but the main affiliation for this talk would be Poznań University of Economics and Business, since these are the results of my doctoral thesis at the university. So without further ado, just briefly about me. I'm in the video game industry since 2014. I don't know, is that okay? The font is a little bit thin, but okay. And I started at the industry as in indie game development. So I wore many hats. Mostly I was project manager, producer, a little bit of designer and researcher. This year I defended my doctoral thesis called Development and Internationalization of Polish Video Game Studios. And my main interests are indie games, serious games, and game studio development and growth and managerial studies. So what's it's gonna be about and what is my main interest? An exploration of growth dynamics, key characteristic and success determinants in video game studios, revealing a need for a new, redefined conceptual framework, leading to a proposed typology that encapsulates studio evolution and strategic diversity. Great, right? But seriously, when we put on the anti-gibberish filter, the idea is pretty simple, actually. I mainly focus and try to find out what do game developers really want and how are they trying to achieve it. I mean, the answer is pretty simple. They want to develop games, and hopefully these games meant to be successful. Yep, but okay, but the answer is not that simple. And how game dev studios are different from one another and what's causing these differences. How game developers define success, because it turns out that everyone defines it differently, and how they are trying to achieve this success. And are there any patterns in studio motivation and behavior, and can we actually measure it? It would be great. Just a few examples of studies that actually inspired me to do so. I'm not going to talk about them. You can have like a few minutes to get a photo. The More Than One Flop from Bankruptcy, very interesting publication. Self-making and game making in the future of work. And Game Changer, the typology of creativity. That one is especially interested. It explores the idea of cognitive structure and backgrounds and experience of game developers in larger groups, and how does it influence on creating a game changer titles. And pretty well-known big titles were examined, and pretty big studios were examined in this research. I really highly recommend this one. Of course, there are many talks, mostly from GDC, that actually has the common idea to something what I was aiming at. These are the 3 selected talks. How Game Developers Define Success by Dana Ruggiero, Flopping Successfully, and How to Survive in Game Dev for 11 years Without a Hit. I mean, the titles are pretty self-explanatory, but basically they all share the same idea. And I wanted to explore that idea because, in my opinion, in current literature, it's not explored that deep as it should be, in my opinion. The basic idea is, while making video games, we have to keep a balance between the business approach and between the art and creativity approach. And the common notion, and it is kind of difficult because business and art and creativity seems like being on two sides of the barricade. I mean, it's a hard thing to balance, and I believe that finding a perfect balance, a perfect spot in this is the way to go. We probably know some studios that prioritize business and neglect the creativity part and the artistic parts, and vice versa. Some studios do not prioritize that high the profit that much and focus on doing what they love and in the way they love. And this whole thing is kind of characteristic to creative industry as a whole. This dilemma, this trying to find a balance between those two things. And in my opinion, that is a key feature that determines what style of studio, what type of a studio is currently in. And we often fall into this tendency of seeing, perceiving the success in a linear manner. And it's like binary, success or failure. Like either you do some commercial success and get a fast growth international recognition, or either you failure, publish some super flop and you're out of money and studio is closed. But actually, as you all know, it's not that simple, actually. There are many points between those two extremes and also going like over on the left side, even after a big failure, some teams are still doing it, even despite they have no money. So that is not binary, that is not simple, and we have to take that into account when analyzing what are the motives, what are the goals of video game developers. And I don't like to think it about this way, like the road to success being like a straight line. For me, it's more like a multitude of different paths that leads us to success. And for it to be even more complicated, the success, it's really hard to define because each studio has a different approach to it and see the success in a different way. So there is a multitude of directions. There is a multitude of paths that some of the studios might take. And many research shows that many of video game designers actually tend to fall into the artistic and creative focused, neglecting the business part, and they don't really care that much. I mean, of course, they know that they need money, but that is not the highest priority for them. So because of that, their development path is kind of different, the growth path of the studio. And yeah, we can say that, yeah, the art and the creativity, it's so poetic, it's so nostalgic and very romantic vision, but we can't neglect it, and multitude of studies show that this is actually one of the main focus for many medium-sized and small-sized studios that drives them to doing what they do despite their difficulties. And one thing that is very important for me, and was the key idea behind my dissertation thesis. What are the types of game developers? How do we classify them? I mean, you can answer yourself. You probably know some different types of classifications. And, well, you probably heard about AAA, AA, indie, premium indie. We can divide them through genre perspective. Some studios doing just focusing on doing strategies or other genres of games. Some studios tend to specialize in one of the platforms. Some are multi-platforms. And there's also this kind of classification where it comes to the relationship between the game developer and the platform holder, the first party, second party, third party, and so on. And I have a problem with this classification. And for me, actually, it's old way of thinking, and I think we need a better way to describe video game creators to understand their motives and their goals. I mean, we can find like premium indie strategy, mobile first-party developer. Okay. But my point is, what does it explain? Do we have a clear vision what kind of a game studio that is, what they do, what they want to do, what are their goals, how they're trying to achieve it, what are their team compositions, what they prioritize when they're recruiting and stuff. So for me, this actually is really shallow way of classifying video game developers. And of course, if we ask on a bigger audience who's indie, almost everyone can say is indie. And during my research, a lot of really big, almost corporate class studios said that, yeah, we are indie, totally, like 100% we are indie, because we don't really know what that means anymore. I mean, indie can mean that we are developing smaller games with a smaller budget. It can mean that we have no publisher or investor, but maybe we have. And also a lot of developers that actually have investors and publishers also claim that they are being indie. So we come to the point that being indie actually doesn't mean anything. And everyone interprets it in a different way. So if we interpreted this term differently, and each one of you have their own definition of indie, then this term says nothing. It's like worthless. I mean, it's like a general term, yeah, cool, but it gives us no information. So I have an idea to work on this problem. And what is it exactly? I mean, first thing, I was trying to find out, are there any specific factors that have a direct impact on commercial success of a particular video game studio? Which factors are more important than others, and which factors hinders developers from achieving success, if there are any? And the second part of my goal, what I was trying to achieve with my research, is to create a framework dedicated to classify developers that will take into account a multitude of their key features, characteristics, resources, goals, and environment to accurately determine the type and the profile of a particular video game developer. And probably you heard like about personality tests. So basically what I was trying to do is to create a personality test and personality typology based on a personality type for each developer. So basically that's the key idea. These are two of the very, very well-known personality tests, the Insight Discovery Test and Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, MBTI. And secondly, in general matter, this idea actually isn't that much new. It's not like something groundbreaking, because there are similar frameworks like McKinsey Organizational Health Index or Organizational DNA or Gallup Q12 Employee Engagement Survey, and many, many more. The problem is that these frameworks are very general. I don't like them very much, actually. And they don't show what I was trying to show, and they are not industry specific, because video game industry is kind of special case in this matter, with like it's the similar matter with all creative industries. So they are not suited for creative industry or game dev for that matter, and they don't exactly give results that I'm aiming for. So my proposition is to build up a framework that will consist of 3 parts and will take into account the studio resources, like the studio size, I mean its developers, the studio know-how, tools, games, and financial resources. The studio personality, as I called it, being the goals, motivations, values, culture, and business orientation or specialization, and the environment of the studio in which the studio actually working in. So the partnerships, cooperation, relationships, and local markets. And so, yeah, cool, it sounds okay, but how do you plan to do it? And basically, the plan is to form a research and to conduct it, and firstly form a base assumption and a hypothesis for the research, and to gather data, basically, in form of a survey and in form of an interviews. Then verify it, see if the data makes any sense actually, and form some conclusions, find out what went wrong with my research, and repeat the process with that all insight and knowledge that I gathered from this first iteration. And right now I run the first iteration, but to do it as I planned, I would need like a couple more years to do it as I planned. So there is still a lot ahead of me. And basically, so I formed a survey, and the survey had 30 questions, 30, and some of them were really complex. Some of them were scale questions, some of them were metric questions, and it is a ton of data. I'm not going to read through all of them, but basically, I came up with every idea for a question that I came up to, was able to come up to, and put it into the survey and make sure that it is understandable. But still, as I find out, and it was kind of surprising that some of the data was useless, and that's the thing I learned. I should form a better survey next time and avoid the questions that are hard to understand or even being, annoying for the responders. So either way, I ended up with a ton of data and trying to make any sense, to check if they are making any sense. So, and survey results. Give me a moment for a quick sip of water. I could really use a table. Oh, no, never mind. Okay, so the survey results. When it comes to how I gathered the data, I make up the sample, the population, from two reports, the Game Industry of Poland report 2021 and the Game Industry Report of Poland 2022. And also I complemented it with the data with email addresses from a site called Baza Polski Game Dev. It actually has a ton of additional smaller indie game studios. So consequently, I ended up with a database of 532 email addresses compiled, representing the total number of the population. And I got 180 answers. And I was quite happy about it because this process took 4 months. So first, when I sent the first batch, I started praying for anyone to send me back some answer. And I'm not a religious man, but either way, I prayed. And turns out that some of it came back, but I had to do 4 more follow-ups to gather all the data. So 180 response is quite okay. It's okay, could be better. If I got 400, it would be way, way better. But anyway, when it comes to the answers, just of a few basic statistics, most of the responders were limited liability company, so spółka ZO, 41%. And 80%, because there was a possibility to check this answer, was actually an informal group, no registered business. When it comes to how mature was these developers, most of them was still pretty young, from 3 to 5 years of existence. 27% were even younger, 1 to 2 years, and for 11% was quite mature studios existing for over 10 years. And when we start looking deeper into the data, there are some interesting patterns starting to show up. So this chart presents the distribution of size and age of the studios, okay? So the colors of the bars show how big of each studio, so how many developers they have, the colors. Because the largest group were a studio that existed for 3 to 5 years, those bars are the highest. However, we could expect that the older studio that survived longest on the market would be the biggest. But no, we observe that even among these groups, there are micro studios in 1 to 2 developers or having 20 people at the most. This needs to be further investigated on this, but it's also a matter of the sample and of the data that I had. And when we dive deeper, when we consider the commercial success distribution across the studios of all ages, some more interesting patterns showed up. Because the developers were able to answer if any of their title achieve a commercial success. They have 4 options. The first 2 indicates that yes, we've achieved commercial success and even exceed our expectations. The second, no, it didn't exceed our expectations and it was below expectation, but it's covered the cost of production. So these 2 answers actually I interpreted in my research as a success, either way. So studios were asked, as I said, about this, and the biggest share in achieving success still have fairly young studios, existing for 3 to 5 years, but still, this is the biggest group in the sample, so it's kind of incomparable. And when we take into account, when we actually investigating it further and filter studios that are both small and relatively mature, even though they are small and not focused on growth, they reported financial success. So if they achieve success, commercial success, why don't they grow while existing so long? Well, probably because they choose to, or maybe there are some other reasons, but this stuff needs to be further investigated. So another question for the next survey. And when we look at the importance of different factors for achieving success, the responders, the developers, were asked to rank on a Likert scale, when 1, the reds is not important and 5 being extremely important, to rank how these different factors rank the importance of these factors for achieving their success. And we can see that the permanent team has the biggest share, followed by a good idea, an original idea for a game, followed by creativity and innovation of created projects. These have the biggest share of being extremely important. Participation in acceleration programs were mostly ranked as not important, followed by studio location. Interestingly, a fair share of not being important has been cooperation with the publisher. That's interesting. Followed by external financing. However, these ranks are actually quite divided, so now this shows a diversity of perception of studio in achieving the success. And further, the developers were asked how are they perceiving the success? I mean, what is the definition? I mean, this was a very hard question to formulate. But the developers could choose 3 out of 8 answers, and fulfillment of artistic vision and creativity got a pretty big score. Similarly, completion of the game, so just that could be defined as a successful itself. Positive reviews and high sales scores are also being chosen quite frequently. And what is important actually, and it's not visible on this chart, that for some studios, the last 3 bars were the basis definition of success. They chose only those 3. And the numerous of studios selected just those 3 answered without selecting like high sales results. And perhaps it was obvious to them that having the last 3 will naturally lead to the high sales, or perhaps this is not the top priority for them. And we don't know that, and this also needs a further investigation, but it gives us some cool ideas. And going further, the cooperation with other industry parties. So with a blue color meaning no cooperation at all, and red and blue and purple meaning that the cooperation happened. Purple means that it was for a longer period of time, over 2 years. At first glance, it's clear that in most cases there are little cooperation. However, music outsourcing have a pretty big score, similarly to a publisher or investor. So in some cases, this cooperation took longer than 2 years. So overall, studios tend to have minimal or selective partnerships with long-term collaborations, primarily focusing on specialization, on specialized outsourcing investors and publishers. And probably the most interesting parts, determinant of commercial success. So to do that, we use logistic regression and analyze the coefficient value. So regression coefficients explains how much one variable affects another in a model that includes multiple variables. So in this chart, we can see that cooperation with business partners significantly increases the chances for commercial success. And also same scenario with the team specialization. So teams team specialization, as you can see, multidisciplinary teams skills are likely to be more successful. The team experience differences, and this is kind of surprising. It suggests that the more the team is diversified with their experience, the better results they get. I mean, having both seniors and juniors and veterans and younger people in the industry actually make the chances for a success even higher. Of course, focusing on external development services, well, not of course, this is not obvious, but focusing on external development actually reduces the likelihood of commercial success. So perhaps that's why these studios focusing on offering external development drive them away from focusing on developing their own games, and that might be the reason, but we don't know that. It needs further investigation, as always. And production time. Longer production times, and it might be counterintuitive because it goes on the right, but it's because of the way how the question was formulated. But in short, longer production times are linked to lower chances of financial success, emphasizing the need for efficiency. So if we are developing very, very long, and the teams who are developing their games longer on average, because they were asked on average, how long does it take in your history to develop a game and publish it? So those developers who did it for a longer time have a lower success rate. And this one is probably the most important chart of all, and when I was generating it, I almost got a heart attack, because if I would get like a random noise, the whole idea and this whole thesis could go straight to trash. But luckily not. And 5 seconds for a sip of water. Okay, so we are trying to identify different types of game developers using a method called two-step clustering. And this chart is a visual representation of this method. So when we talk about clusters, we actually mean a group of studios that share the similar characteristics. So each color dot represents a studio and that choose with the same color as a part of the cluster, meaning that they have common traits. So there are actually 180 dots on the screen. You can count if you like. The dots are placed on this chart using components, and components are actually a combination of different characteristics of different variables. So this image is actually a multi-dimensional graph packed into two dimensions. So we are seeing these overlapping dots, the red and the colors are really not nice. But we are seeing this overlapping dots, and you might ask, why are they like, what's the situation here? But this is oversimplification to be like readable at some in any way. So basically, the two axes are two different combination of different characteristics of different variables. And these clusters are actually groups that shares the similarities among multitude of variables, suggesting that they have a lot of similarities. And that's the thing that I was aiming at, and when I see it, it was a big relief for me, because at least it works, kind of. So we got three clusters, and I came up with some fancy names to them. I should came up with something else, but they're okay for now. So cluster one, growth-oriented commercial powerhouses. And these are the studios that are focused on business success or on business development and growth, rarely relying on external financing, focusing on rapid growth, multiple large-scale games to diversify the risk they developed, and they actively collaborate with publishers and investors to achieve this commercial success. The second cluster, I called it artisan veterans with dynamic growth. One of the questions was about the previous experiences in this industry, and there are some, the prior experience in the video game industry when founding this particular studio that they're having right now. And some of them have above 10 to 20 years of experience, which I classify them as veterans. And the one very unique feature of this group is they tend to grow really fast. Like after a few months, from 4 developers to 50, like right away, suggesting also that because they probably have a lot of connections and know a lot of people, they gathering the developers that they work previously with. So these are small sufficient teams, like 20 to 50, as I recall, and they highly valued artistic values and creativity. And also, they have minimal external support. They don't work, they don't buy any external services. And they are mostly limited in the international collaboration. And the third cluster, as I call them, indie craftsmen. And those are sustainability focused, meaning these are studios that actually achieve success, having some successes. They are on the market for a long time, but they either don't grow because they choose not to, or because, I don't know, they have other problems, but this data doesn't explain this, why this is happening. So these are studios with 4 to 10 members, and they produce multiple games at the same time. And they are relying, probably because of the numbers, they are relying on subcontractors rather than investors. They focusing on organic growth without heavily external funding. So that is the quantitative part of my research, and now we are going to the interviews with the developers, because in the survey I asked, do they want to participate in the interview? And some of them said yes. I got 14 interviews with some of these developers, and they were asked 9 questions. And I did it with the help of thematic analysis. So I was just having, I presented the developers one question, and we were having a discussion. The discussion was recorded. After that, I transcribed all the interviews and trying to look for keywords or key sentences. And then I tried to put those key sentences into like common themes. And what is interesting is the themes actually that came up after this analysis. So for the question, what motivates the foundation of your game development studio? Few of the studios said business strategy, some of them creative production, utilizing experiences, and the pursuit of independence. And I was actually looking, does these answers correlates with this clusters are formed. So for this example, this pursuit of independence actually match cluster 3, which is good. It was great. And most of these keywords, most of these key themes actually were matching the results from the survey, which is also good. One of the, I wanted to present some of the key insights that I choose to present for you. This one, choosing your first game to develop and publish is a pretty big deal, and you have to think it through regarding further development. I mean, it's pretty obvious, suggesting that the first title you produce should be really well thought, because if you developing like first-person shooters and then you jump to RPG games or some other kind, you will lost all that know-how that you developed during the first development. The question 2. Has the initial vision of the game studio evolved over time? And this is actually a pretty interesting thing. Some of the studios, and those studios that are mostly business-oriented, have a steady vision, which is kind of obvious, and we could expect it, but it is nice to have it like grounded into the data. That steady vision is for those studios who are mostly business-focused. Evolving vision and radical shifts. Radical shifts came up to the studios that are actually in the third cluster more than in the first one. Initial insight. Has the initial vision of your studio evolved over time? We first wanted to create a big RPG game, as that is the kind of game we like the most and at the time. But soon it turned out that it is not easy and we need to focus on what we do the best. At the time, around 2010, there was a big market for Flash animation and a big simple games made in this technology. So that's what we focused on. Question 3, what is the current level of development of your studio and your aim to achieve and to maintain? And 3 themes came up: rapid expansion, gradual growth, and sustainable quality enhancement. The sustainable quality enhancement was actually reserved to the veterans and this indie craftsmen's group. One interesting insight: we got everything we need to create something valuable, and we know exactly how to do it. I guess this will take us 5 to 4 years, and this studio actually didn't focus to collaborate on investors, on producers, or publishers, and they were doing everything on their own. really nice example. Question 4, how has your studio developed over the years? And 3 themes: fluctuating development, consistent growth, and sustainable growth. Also, each one of these themes correlates to the groups that I formed in the quantitative studies. What was the most significant barriers and challenges encountered in development? There were many themes in this. So market dynamics, talent acquisition, internal problems, and financial stability and partner acquisitions. Those were the themes. I'm not going to dive into it. Do you believe that the cooperation with foreign partners contributed or could contribute to accelerated development of your studio? This was actually the question: do you prefer domestic publishers and investors, or do you prefer foreign, like mostly Western investors and publishers? That was the question actually, but it was formed more nicely. The themes came up: foreign partners based on experience, potential foreign collaboration without experience, and like 2 studios actually preferred domestic investors and publishers. What does success look like for a studio? This was very important to me, and a lot of studios actually said that, not directly, but it was put up into the same team, that the artistic fulfillment is very important, and they see the success directly in it. Games and studio recognition, creative freedom and self-improvement, project completion, and business performance. And also this correlates to the groupings, because business performance, actually those studio who selected the first, who was classified as the first class, said that more frequently. Questions about question 7, 2 interesting insights. How was about the time? Oh, okay. I'm almost finished, you guys. So what does success look like to a studio, and some insight? Well, revenue is important, but not the most important. We had success with previous titles, so right now we can focus on polishing our skills and do something really fun and good, which is great. So this was a very good insight for me. So studio that got success, that's achieve a commercial success, they got the money to develop for their projects. They don't aim to scale up, and they don't aim to be a bigger, more corporate style organization. They want to stay as they are, and they are happy that finally they can do what they want. The second, honestly, the games we are making right now and made so far are not the kind of games we always wanted to make. We know that there is a huge market for simulation games, and investors like such products. So we are gathering as much experience as we can and trying to build a good relations with partners and obtain financial stability. Only then, having enough money as a backup, we will start making games that we always wanted, fulfilling our vision. So very interesting point of view. And this actually very similar response came up 2 times in the whole interviews. What does success, in your opinion, what is the most crucial element for a studio achieve success? 4 themes came up: vision and passion, human capital, business management, and product excellence. And the last question, in your opinion, what is the most crucial element for a studio to achieve success? Partner selection, growth and development, pace, and organizational. This was actually the question. I pasted it wrong. This was the question about barriers. What barriers did you meet on your way during the development? So there was the problem with the partner selection, with the growth development pace, and with the organizational practices. One key insight about the barriers: we had an opportunity to work with one of the biggest, renowned game publishers. We let down that opportunity because the publisher was up to strongly interfere with our game vision. Looking at it from a perspective, that was a terrible mistake. We could be a much bigger, better developed studio right now if we decide back then to work with them. And that's actually the last slide. Thank you for your patience. If you would like to contact me and discuss further these wonderful results, here's my LinkedIn account, so you can scan it. I hope it works. And it, links to the LinkedIn, right? Oh, great. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks. I think we have a few more minutes, so if you have any questions, go ahead. Please. Should I give the microphone?
Well, thank you for the presentation. And hence, I'm also from the academic background, also from the managerial and organizational science, and also doing PhD years ago about determinants of success.
We
right.
can share our results.
Right. That is why I'm having my voice here. And my first question is, because I will strongly recommend, recommendation/question, have you considered doing the factor analysis? Because I've noticed that you have correlation and cluster grouping, but factor analysis could explain you the variation between the different parties in your survey and maybe show you the dimensions slightly different. So my question is whether you use this method, the factor analysis, especially exploratory factor analysis.
No, actually, I didn't. I didn't use it.
So that would be my recommendation to use it as a method. Mm-hmm. And a second question, a little bit nitty-picky, but why topology?
This is a very good question. Typology, because during my dissertation defense, I was really hardly pointed out that why classification. It should be topology. And the commission that actually gave me this running this dissertation defense strongly suggested that I should use the word topology, because these are not classes, these are types, though thus this should be topology. So, typology. No, it's type, oh my God, does the 10 is wrong?
Maybe I'm wrong.
Impossible. Typology, I don't have the plan for that, but it should be typology. Okay. I know
it is typology. Sorry, that's why I say.
Oh, great. No problem.
Sorry, so far there was no question.
Okay, great. Please? No, thank you.
You did amazing job, cool research. I hope it's still open and I want to participate. But the question, how the studio can use it in practice to understand what kind of studio am I and what should I change to take other secrets of success?
Great question, actually. And right now, well, they can't use it right now because the whole method, the whole framework isn't finished yet. But if I'm gonna somehow do it like for this couple of years as I planned. If it works, when the framework will be done, and probably there will be having more types and very advanced expanded survey, because that's how it would work. If you would like to get yourself a rank, a type, or know each other like for a, let's say, certified framework that it might be in the future, you will go through, fill out the whole survey, and you will get a rank that will classify you somehow. And this classification also actually speaks a lot about you, what to expect from you, what to not expect from you, what partners should you be looking for, or what other partners can expect for you and how would you develop in the future. So actually this is a deeper profiling of the developers, because right now if you are talking with an investor or publisher, You are sending a ton of pitches, you are sending a lot of documentation, you are sending financial reports, and based on that material, the publisher and investor trying to figure it out, who are you exactly and want to expect from you. And this should be the simplification of this traditional method. That's how it would be useful for you with collaboration and starting partnerships with other partners like investors and publishers.
And probably it will tell me what to expect.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Because if we would examine like 1,000 of developers, we can track their history, their activities, their behavior, what they do at certain points, and learn a lesson from them or from a whole database. Thank you. Any other question?
One more.
Yes?
Because you started basically that whole topic because of the you started the whole topic because of the specificity of the industry, right? I mean,
Yes.
And even one of the first slides was showing some other methods of classifying sources of success and so on, or basically describing the organizations. And throughout this conference, especially when there was any time a topic of business or management, there was this hanging question of what is specific really about game industry? What is so specific? Why, for example, in your case, why we cannot use the already existing models? And could you like briefly answer your opinion, what is the most specific aspect of game dev industry that requires such a additional modeling, right?
Yes. The uncertainty, that's the one thing. The heterogeneity. The fact that we tend to fall into this trap that each studio, each developer is a unique case. And it's somehow true because it's really hard to find patterns. It's really hard to find similar paths among these developers. So it's really hard, and in my opinion, it's really hard to examine them and to run a research that would give us some conclusions on the developmental paths of these studios. So I would say the uncertainty, the unpredictability of the game studio, the multitude of goals and motivations, and the fact that video game developers mixing the artistry and creativity alongside with the business side of it and trying to weigh both things, which is common for creative industry, but uncommon for other industries, maybe.
Okay, right, thank you.
Thank you.
How do you use this science background in practice with working with a team as a game producer?
Right now I don't. Perhaps I could, but maybe not right now, because being just a regular producer, I don't go to like more top management meeting and stuff. Maybe when I will be a executive producer, then I could use that knowledge, this knowledge.
One more question. Did you have some kind of errors? So, for example, the studio answered and everything should point that they should be successful, but they don't. Or vice versa, nothing pointed to it, but they are error and they had success.
Yeah, it was exactly that scenario in the sum of the data, and I couldn't figure it out what was the case, that actually they are, do not match the model. So I was forced to exclude them from the sample.
Is it kind of luck?
Maybe, yeah, probably. It might be luck. Because still, I need to underline this, this was a fairly small sample, like 180, mostly small. If I had like 500 or 1,000.
But the population was 500, right?
The population was 500, yeah, because in Poland...
Very large, 20%.
Compared to exactly, compared to how it is in Poland, it was fairly large, but I would like to expand the next research like globally and to get more data. Please.
Maybe you thought about some external factors of success, because crisis or
Yeah.
popularity of some genre of something like that. And that's why maybe some of the studios shouldn't be
Yes.
success, but
Yes, very good point. The external factors, I didn't included them that strongly, but they should be included in the more in further research. Right now, the only external factors was like collaboration or business environment, but not like bigger scale outside factors. Even though I focus mostly on inside factors, I still got a ton of data to analyze. So it was very broad research still. Okay, I think that's all. So thank you again for your attention.